The rain fell in sheets, turning the valley into a blur of gray and water. Daniel Hale leaned forward as he walked, his coat collar pulled high against the storm, though little could keep him dry. His boots sank into the mud with each step, sucking at the soles, reminding him of how heavy the world had become. He had been out since dawn, mending fences that no longer seemed worth saving, checking troughs for cattle that barely grazed anymore. The land, once alive with promise, mirrored his own hollow chest, empty, stripped, beaten by too many seasons of loss. The neighbors called him stubborn for staying on. Some whispered pity when they saw him in town. Others let scorn slip easily from their lips. A man alone on a failing farm was more story than substance to them, and Daniel heard every word even if they spoke behind his back. Since his wife had passed 3 years before, he had been living with silence and the echoes of what used to be. She had been the voice in the kitchen, the laughter across the pasture, the dreamer who talked of filling the barn with animals too broken for anyone else to want. He had buried her with those dreams, or so he told himself, because to hope again seemed dangerous. He was about to turn back toward the house when he heard it. A cry, thin and piercing, carried just enough through the storm to reach him. At first he thought it was a bird, maybe a fox caught in wire. But then it came again, weaker this time, and something inside him shifted. He followed the sound across the field, through a sagging gate that clung to its hinges, until he reached the far edge of the pasture. There, huddled against a snarl of barbed wire and brush, lay a foal no older than 3 months. Its coat, once likely chestnut bright, was matted and soaked, plastered against ribs that showed too sharp beneath the skin. Thin legs trembled with every attempt to rise, only to give out, sending it collapsing into the mud again. Daniel stood still, letting the storm wash over him, unable to tear his gaze away. The foal lifted its head with effort, and he saw its eyes, one deep brown, the other pale and clouded like a drop of milk spilled into water. That broken, mismatched stare held him fast, pleading though no words were spoken. He took a step closer, then stopped. He had no room for this, no strength to carry another weight. The farm barely fed him, let alone a half-dead animal that would require time, food, medicine. Reason screamed that he should walk away, let nature finish what it had begun. His jaw tightened as he stood there, fighting the war inside himself. The foal gave a sharp, pitiful cry, and Daniel flinched. In the sound he heard not just need but recognition, as if the creature knew him, knew he too had been left behind. A memory surfaced without warning. His wife, sitting on the porch in summer, telling him that every act of kindness was a seed planted, whether or not one lived to see it bloom. She had believed in saving what others discarded. He had told her she was naive, but now those words turned against him. With a sigh more like a groan, Daniel crouched low, mud soaking his knees. The foal shrank back, eyes wide, but it did not flee. He pulled a pocket knife from his coat, slicing the wire that clung to its flank, careful not to cut too close. The barbs released with resistance, tearing threads of hair. When the last strand fell away, the foal slumped sideways, too weak to stand. Daniel slipped his arms beneath the trembling body, surprised by how little weight there was. The animal's heart thudded wildly against his chest. A fragile rhythm pressed into him through skin and cloth. By the time he turned back toward the house, figures had gathered on distant porches. Neighbors watched from under eaves, their faces half hidden by the storm, but their judgment plain. He caught fragments carried on the wind. Foolish, waste. He'll never keep it alive. He lowered his eyes and kept walking, the foal bundled against him like a burden and a promise. Each step grew heavier as mud clung to his boots, but he did not stop. He told himself he was doing it because he had no choice, because to leave it was worse than to try. Yet beneath the layers of reason something deeper stirred, a flicker he had not allowed in years. The foal shifted faintly in his arms, breathing shallow but steady, as if it had chosen him. By the time he reached the barn, the storm had slowed to a steady patter, the valley wrapped in gray stillness. Daniel set the foal down onto dry straw, watching as it curled into itself with a faint sigh. For a moment, standing in the dim light, he felt the echo of another presence beside him. Her voice, her hand brushing his sleeve, her dream returning in fragile form. He pressed his hand to the foal's damp neck, feeling the faint tremor beneath. "Easy," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was for the animal or for himself. Outside, the world remained heavy and doubtful, but within the walls of that barn a question lingered. Could broken things endure if given shelter? Or was he only postponing the inevitable? The foal stirred, lifting its mismatched gaze to him once more. And in that look was a defiance he hadn't expected. Daniel drew a sharp breath, realizing he had already crossed the threshold. Whatever came next, he had taken the first step. And though he had no room left for hope, the small life he carried inside his barn breathed as if it believed otherwise. The barn smelled of damp straw and rusted iron, the air heavy with the residue of the storm. Daniel knelt by the foal, his hands trembling as he arranged old blankets around its frail body. The animal's sides rose and fell in shallow rhythm, breath rattling faintly like a thread about to snap. He had no medicine, no training beyond what his wife once showed him when they nursed a calf, but instinct drove him to act. He fetched a chipped bucket of warm water, dipped rags into it, and pressed them gently over the foal's cuts. The creature twitched, eyes rolling back for a moment, and he whispered low, his voice more gravel than comfort. "Stay with me. Just a little longer." Through the night he labored, shoulders hunched against cold, moving between tending the foal and stoking a lantern whose flame guttered with each draft. He poured milk into a battered bottle fitted with a rubber teat, coaxing the foal to drink. At first the animal resisted, mouth clamped, but after several tense minutes it suckled weakly, draining only a mouthful. Relief washed through him so sharp it startled him. He leaned back against the wall, exhaustion flooding his bones, though sleep remained impossible. Each time his eyes closed, he feared they might not open to see the foal alive. When dawn came, pale light filtered through gaps in the boards. The foal stirred faintly, lifting its head before collapsing again. A fragile victory that loosened something in Daniel's chest. He rose stiffly, went to the house, and returned with his wife's old quilt. Its fabric worn, its scent long faded. He draped it over the foal, careful, reverent. For the first time in years, he spoke her name aloud. "Clara, you'd have known what to do." His throat closed, but he forced the words out. "I'm trying." In town later that day, whispers followed him like shadows. At the supply store, he purchased oats, more milk, and clean bandages. Behind him someone muttered, "Pouring good money into a dying thing." Another voice answered, "Fools clinging to ghosts." Heat burned his ears, yet he said nothing. He kept his gaze steady, jaw clenched, though every word etched deeper into him. Back at the farm, he unpacked his meager supplies, telling himself it wasn't about them, nor their judgment. It was about a choice he had already made. Nights bled into days. Daniel learned to recognize the foal's signs. The restless shift that meant hunger, the stillness that meant fear. He hummed to it sometimes, tunes he had not realized he remembered, melodies Clara used to fill their evenings. His voice cracked, but the foal's ears twitched as if listening, as if the sound mattered. Slowly, its legs grew stronger. It managed to stand a little longer each day, wobbling, collapsing, trying again. Daniel steadied it with rough hands, guiding it step by step, whispering small encouragements. Yet doubt gnawed at him. The farm was no better off than before, the fields thin, the fences failing. He questioned if saving one foal could change anything, or if it was only delaying another loss. One evening, as the sky bruised purple, the foal collapsed with a violent shiver, foam at its nostrils. Panic clenched his gut. He fell to his knees, clutching cool rags, pressing them to its overheated skin. The animal's breaths came shallow, uneven, each one threatening to be the last. Daniel's hands shook, useless, until he caught sight of Clara's photograph nailed to a beam in the barn. Her smile, quiet, certain, met him with a challenge. She had believed in mercy, believed that broken things deserved tending. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the foal's damp neck. "I won't give you up," he whispered fiercely. "Not tonight." For hours he stayed like that, cooling the animal with water, murmuring into the silence. The storm inside him matched the fever before him, both refusing to yield. At last, when the horizon paled with morning, the foal stirred. Its chest rose with steadier rhythm, eyes flickering open, one brown, one pale. They fixed on him with quiet endurance. Daniel sat back, shoulders slumping, breath hitching as relief broke over him. He had held death at bay, if only for another day. The barn filled with stillness, broken only by the foal's soft exhale. Daniel rubbed his eyes, but a faint smile tugged at his mouth, the first in years. He knew struggle lay ahead, knew the whispers would not stop. But for the first time the silence in his life carried something more than grief. It carried possibility. And as the foal pressed its small head weakly against his arm, Daniel realized that choice, made in the storm, had already begun to reshape him. Spring softened the valley, and with it the foal began to change. Its ribs no longer jutted like broken fence posts, its legs steadied beneath the weight of growth, and the dull coat gained a faint gloss that caught the sun. Daniel found himself watching it in quiet disbelief, remembering the lifeless heap he had carried through rain. Now it followed him across the yard with a loyalty he had not earned, its mismatched eyes bright with a stubborn kind of trust. Each step it took seemed to pull him further from the shadow of his grief, though he dared not admit it aloud. Days fell into rhythm. Daniel woke before dawn, fed the foal, then walked it through the pasture. At first it stumbled, tangling its long legs, but with patience it learned the feel of earth beneath hooves. Daniel spoke little, yet his silences softened, filled with presence rather than absence. Sometimes he caught himself humming as he brushed its coat, a fragment of melody slipping free before he noticed. In those moments he felt Clara close again, her dream of a sanctuary flickering through him like sunlight through leaves. He had not rebuilt her vision, but he was no longer standing in ruins either. The town, however, saw only folly. At the feed store, Briggs, the wealthiest rancher in the county, leaned on a barrel and laughed loud enough for all to hear. "Hale's playing nursemaid to a runt," he jeered. "Doesn't know when to cut his losses." Men around him chuckled, women shook their heads. Daniel met the mockery with a silence sharper than words, though inside it reopened every wound. His father had taught him never to show weakness before men like Briggs, but he felt the sting long after leaving. That night, as he watched the foal sleep, he whispered into the stillness, "They don't know you. They don't know me either." In time the foal grew bold, nudging his shoulder when he lagged, chasing shadows across the pasture, testing its strength with playful kicks. Daniel endured bruises with a laugh he hardly recognized as his own. He began shaping rails to repair the pen, not out of obligation but anticipation, planning for a future he had once abandoned. Yet hope, once stirred, brought its own peril. The more he cared, the more he feared losing it. Each cough, each stumble froze him with dread that the fragile thread might snap. It was Briggs again who gave shape to that fear. One afternoon, as Daniel led the foal along the road, Briggs rode up on his bay stallion, towering above. His smirk held the confidence of a man who owned more land than he could ride in a day. "That thing'll never make a horse," he said, eyes narrowing at the foal's pale eye. "It's a blemish. Weak stock. You'll sink with it, Hale." He leaned forward in the saddle, voice lowering. "Why not spare yourself the shame? Sell it off while you still can. Daniel tightened his grip on the rope, the foal shifting nervously at his side. Shame threatened to swallow him, but beneath it burned something harder. Not for sale, he answered, steady though his throat ached. Briggs chuckled, spurring his horse forward. We'll see. The fair's coming. Bring it then. Prove me wrong if you can. The words lingered like a challenge carved into stone. That night Daniel could not sleep. He walked to the barn, lantern in hand, and found the foal watching him, eyes glinting in the dim light. He sat beside it, lowering himself onto the straw, and admitted what pride had hidden. I don't know if you'll ever be strong enough. I don't know if I am either. The foal nosed his sleeve, insistent, and he felt an unexpected surge of resolve. Whether or not the world believed, he would not betray the trust placed in him. In the weeks that followed, he prepared. He led the foal through noisy fields to accustom it to distraction, brushed its coat until it shone, whispered steady words each time fear flared in its gaze. They learned each other's rhythms, the quick flick of ears when danger pressed near, the tightening of Daniel's hand when doubt threatened. Neighbors shook their heads at the sight, but he no longer cared. What mattered was the bond forged in storms and sleepless nights. As the fair approached, tension grew. He feared humiliation, the weight of every mocking gaze. But deeper than fear pulsed something stronger. The chance to prove that survival was not weakness, that scars could shine. One evening, with the sky washed in firelight, he stood at the pasture's edge watching the foal trot with newfound grace. The wind carried Clara's voice through memory, reminding him that kindness was not wasted even if the world laughed. Daniel tightened the rope in his hand, heart heavy yet steady. The trial ahead would not only measure the foal's strength, but his own. Whatever came, they would face it together. And though uncertainty pressed close, he could feel tomorrow stirring on the horizon, waiting to be claimed. The morning of the fair broke clear. The sky stretched wide and blue as though washed clean by the night's rain. Daniel rose before the sun, nerves raw beneath his calm exterior. In the barn, the foal stood waiting, its mismatched eyes fixed on him as if it knew the day carried more weight than most. He brushed its coat until it gleamed, smoothing down stubborn tufts of hair with hands steadier than he felt. Each stroke whispered of the months behind them, the storm, the fever, the nights of doubt, and of the fragile trust that had grown into something stronger. He tightened the rope halter and spoke softly. It's just you and me. That's all it's ever been. The fairground bustled by mid-morning, the air thick with the scent of hay, dust, and roasted corn. Horses stamped in their pens, ribbons fluttered. Children shouted through the din. Daniel led the foal through the throng, shoulders squared against the curious stares. Some faces softened with surprise at the sight of the once-ailing creature now walking steady, but more carried smirks, shaking heads, or whispered bets against them. He ignored the noise, though each murmur pressed heavy on his chest. Briggs stood near the main ring, arms crossed, his stallion shining like burnished copper. His smile was sharp as a blade. Didn't think you'd come, Hale. Best prepare yourself for the shame. Daniel said nothing, only led the foal inside the enclosure. The test was simple. Lead the animal through a series of posts, demonstrate calm under pressure, prove that it could trust and be trusted. To most it was routine, but to him it was everything. He knelt briefly, meeting the foal's eyes, seeing fear tremble there at the roar of the crowd. Look at me, he murmured. Just me. Rising, he guided it forward. The rope quivered as the foal balked at the first post, ears twitching, muscles tight. Laughter rippled from the onlookers. Daniel's jaw set, his voice low and sure. Easy. One step. The foal hesitated, then moved, its hooves tentative against packed dirt. Another step, and another, until it passed the first obstacle. The laughter faded, replaced by a hush edged with curiosity. At the second post, A child dropped a tin pail with a clatter that rang across the arena. The foal startled, eyes wide, but Daniel's hand steadied the rope, his voice threading through panic. "Stay with me. You're safe." Slowly the tremors eased. Together they circled the post, steady once more. By the third, something shifted. The foal's stride lengthened, head lifted, mismatched eyes bright as if daring the world to doubt it. The crowd leaned forward, silence thick as dust. Daniel's heart pounded, but not with fear. This was pride, raw and unfamiliar. As they reached the final post, the foal walked beside him without hesitation, steps light, almost graceful. Gasps broke the quiet. Then applause swelled, rolling like a wave over the arena. Daniel stopped, placing a hand on the foal's neck, his throat too tight for words. In its small body he saw resilience greater than his own. Proof that scars did not mean ruin but survival. Briggs turned away, face stiff, muttering something lost beneath the cheers. For once, Daniel did not care. He stood tall, shoulders squared. Not to defy the crowd, but to honor the journey that had brought him here. Children pressed near the rail, eyes wide with wonder. One girl reached out, asking shyly, "Can I touch him?" Daniel lifted the foal's rope slack, letting it step closer. It lowered its head, accepting her small hand against its muzzle. The sight pulled at something deep in him, a reminder of Clara's dream of giving hope to the unwanted. The applause softened, but the moment lingered, stretched golden in memory. Daniel looked out across the fairground, at faces no longer mocking, but filled with quiet respect. He realized then it was not victory that mattered, but the choice to stand, to believe in something fragile despite the risk of loss. The foal pressed its head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust as natural as breathing. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed hope to settle in his chest, steady and unashamed. What began in rain and despair had carried him to this moment of light. He knew the days ahead would not be easy, but neither would they be empty. Together, he and the foal had proven that broken things could endure, that survival could shine brighter than triumph. As he led it from the ring, the crowd still murmuring with awe, Daniel felt the weight of his past lighten, replaced by something fragile yet enduring. It was not just the foal he had saved. In some unspoken way, it had saved him too.